The marble floor of the Grand Palais Hotel restaurant gleamed under chandeliers that cost more than Nora Sinclair would earn in 5 years. It was 2:41 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and the lunch crowd had settled into their expensive meals like birds roosting on wire. Silverware clinked against porcelain. Ice cubes tumbled in crystal glasses. The air smelled of truffle oil and old money. Nora stood frozen in the center of it all, holding her daughter Emma against her hip. The 18-month-old small fingers gripped the fabric of Nora's soaked delivery uniform, and her face had crumpled into the expression children make before they shatter into sobs. "You are nothing but trash who steals from honest people." Victoria Ashford's voice cut through the restaurant like a blade through silk. She stood 6 feet away, draped in cream-colored Chanel that probably cost more than Nora's monthly rent if she had had rent money to pay. Diamonds caught the light at her wrists and throat and earlobes. Her face was perfectly constructed cruelty, the kind that came from a lifetime of believing the world was hers to judge. Beside Nora, Douglas Hale's hand closed around her arm. Hard. His fingers found the soft underside of her bicep and squeezed until her breath caught. He was 58, with a bloated face of someone who drank whiskey every night and called it business. His grip shook her body slightly, deliberately, like he was testing her structural integrity. "I saw you pocket that 20, he said, his voice dropping into the register he used when he wanted to sound dangerous. "Table 7. Left it right there for you to steal." Emma's cry started small. A whimper. Then it swelled into the full-bodied wail that only a terrified toddler could produce, the kind of sound that made every nerve in Nora's body contract with protective fury. 50 heads turned. 50 sets of eyes landed on the woman in the stained delivery uniform holding a screaming child while a man in a suit shook her like she weighed nothing. "Call the police," Victoria demanded, her voice sharp and bright as broken glass. "I want her arrested. We cannot have thieves working in this city. She probably steals from her own child." The words landed like punches. Nora's face burned crimson. Heat flooded her chest and throat. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. How could she explain? How could she say that the tip jar at her other job, the one where she worked midnight shifts at Mercy Care Home lifting the bodies of elderly patients who could no longer lift themselves, that jar had been stolen 3 days ago? How could she say that Emma needed medicine, that the fever had climbed to 103 degrees yesterday morning, that the pediatrician had said ear infection, we need antibiotics, and that Nora had exactly $34 in her checking account and not a single penny more? How could she explain to these people who had never counted change to see if they could afford milk, that she had not taken anything? She had not taken anything. But standing there in the middle of the Grand Palais Hotel restaurant, watching 50 strangers' faces harden into contempt, watching her daughter shake with terror, Nora realized that truth was less important than the narrative someone with power decided to tell. Meanwhile, 300 feet away on the other side of a marble column that blocked the view of the main floor, Alejandro Calabrese sat in a private booth with a view of everything. His espresso cup had frozen halfway to his lips at the moment Victoria's voice had cut through the restaurant. He did not move. He did not blink. He simply watched. Alejandro Calabrese was the kind of man who could end someone with a phone call. He was 41 years old, with the broad-shouldered build of someone who had learned to fight before he learned to read, and the controlled stillness of someone for whom violence was no longer necessary because everyone already knew what he was capable of. His dark hair showed silver at the temples. His eyes were the color of storm clouds on a winter morning. A scar ran from his right eye to his cheekbone in a thin white line, the souvenir of his 16th birthday when his father had turned on him with a broken beer bottle for bringing home failing grades. He wore a black suit tailored so precisely that it looked like armor, and an open white shirt that showed the edge of his chest. A gold watch worth more than Nora's entire apartment sat on his wrist, heavy and precise, keeping perfect time while the rest of the world fell apart. His lieutenant Bruno leaned across the table, beginning to whisper something urgent about the shipment coming in at the docks at midnight, but Alejandro raised one finger, a single finger, and Bruno stopped mid-sentence. The finger meant silence. The finger meant watch. Alejandro's dark eyes remained locked on the scene unfolding 30 feet away. On the terrified woman. On the crying child. On the manager's hand closing around her arm hard enough to bruise. On Victoria Ashford's expression of absolute certainty that she was right, that Nora was guilty, that some people were simply born to be stepped on. Something in Alindro's chest shifted. A small thing. Almost nothing. The kind of micro-adjustment that happens when a man who has learned to protect himself from feelings sees something that reaches past his defenses. Emma's cry reached a fever pitch. The sound was raw, animal, the sound of absolute vulnerability. Nora's free hand came up to shield her daughter's small body, pulling her closer, her own eyes glistening but refusing to spill tears. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Douglas Hale's grip tightened. "Admit it," he hissed, his breath hot against her ear. "Admit you stole it and maybe I don't press charges." But what Nora Sinclair did not know as she stood there burning with humiliation was that the man watching from the shadows had been tracking Douglas Hale for 8 weeks. What she did not know was that Bruno had been gathering evidence of something far darker than a missing $20 bill. What she did not know was that the next 72 hours would dismantle everything Victoria Ashford and Douglas Hale believed about their power, their immunity, their right to humiliate people who had nothing. What she did not know was that she had just been saved, even if salvation had not yet arrived. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Now let us go back, 8 years earlier, to the moment Nora Sinclair walked through the doors of Mercy Care Home for the first time, not understanding that she was walking into a cage that would take everything from her. To understand what happened at the Grand Palais Hotel on that Tuesday afternoon, you need to understand how a woman becomes desperate enough to be accused of stealing food money. You need to understand the 1,000 small ways that poverty grinds a person down. You need to understand Nora. 8 years earlier, the rain fell on San Francisco in sheets that turned the sky the color of a bruise. Nora Sinclair had arrived at the Mercy Care Home at 11:27 in the evening with her hair still damp from the bus stop and her shoes already falling apart at the sole. She was 24 years old then, young enough that people still sometimes held doors for her, still saw potential in her face instead of resignation. The director, a woman named Patricia who had hired Nora over email without so much as a phone interview, had given her a uniform that did not fit and a schedule that started at midnight and ended at 8 in the morning. The pay was $12 an hour. There were no benefits. "You will be lifting patients," Patricia had said, her voice carrying the flat effect of someone who had stopped caring about the people she managed years ago. "Some are cooperative. Most are not. If they fall, you fall with them. If they hurt you, you do not make a fuss. Do you understand?" Nora had nodded because she needed the job. Her mother had just been diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, and the treatment costs had already begun to pile up like snow in winter. Nora had moved out of her apartment, cashed out her tiny 401k early, and taken the first job that would hire her. She had also failed to mention, during the entire hiring process, that she was pregnant. Emma was born 8 months later, during her lunch break on a Tuesday night. Nora had felt the first contraction at 4:33 in the morning while lifting a patient named Margaret who weighed more than 200 pounds and screamed whenever anyone touched her. By 6:27 a.m., Nora's water had broken. By 7:44 a.m., she was in a cab heading to County Hospital. Emma arrived at 9:18 p.m. that same day, 6 pounds and 3 ounces of absolute terror and absolute love. Patricia had not been happy when Nora returned to work for weeks later, still bleeding, still in pain, still grieving the fact that she could only afford childcare during her work hours, which meant her daughter spent her days in a subsidized facility while Nora lifted bodies and changed soiled sheets and listened to patients call her names. "You are slower now," Patricia had said after the first week. "The other aides can do the work you do in half the time." But there was no other option. The cancer treatment for Nora's mother had cost $60,000. The birth of Emma had cost another $30,000. The hospital bills sat on Nora's kitchen table in a stack that made her physically ill when she looked at them. So Nora had kept showing up. Every night for 8 years, she had walked through the doors of Mercy Care Home at 11:11 p.m. Every night, she had lifted patients from beds to wheelchairs. Every night, she had cleaned up after them, spoken gently to them, treated them with the dignity that the world had stopped offering them. And every night, Douglas Hale had been there, waiting. He had started as the restaurant manager. Over the years, he had positioned himself as the de facto boss of the facility, a man with keys to every office, with access to every scheduling system, with leverage over employees who could not afford to lose their jobs. Nora's tips had disappeared. First $10 here, $20 there. Then she had started noticing that her hours were being cut without explanation. Then her pay rate, which she only discovered when she started receiving direct deposits, had mysteriously dropped by $2 an hour. When she had asked Douglas about it, his response had been immediate and physical. He had grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave finger marks that lasted 3 days. He had leaned close and whispered, "You do not ask questions about money. You smile and you work and you be grateful you have a job at all. You understand." She had understood. The only brightness in those 8 years had been Emma. Her daughter had grown from an impossible newborn into a tiny person with copper-colored curls and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. Every morning before school, Nora would sit with Emma at their kitchen table in the cramped studio apartment they shared with another family, and she would count money. $17. 43 cents. Another job cutting hair at a salon on weekends, another $30 from babysitting, another $20 from selling her grandmother's china plates on the internet. She had kept her grandmother's recipe book, the one with handwritten notes in the margins in her grandmother's spidery script. Nora had read those notes every night before sleep. Her grandmother had written things like "Love feeds the soul" and "A meal shared is a prayer answered" and "No one is ever truly alone if they know how to make bread." Nora did not have time to make bread. She worked 84 hours a week. She slept for hours a night. She was 28, but her hands looked like they belonged to someone 60. Her back ached in ways that did not stop anymore. Her feet carried permanent bruises. Then Emma had gotten sick. 3 days ago, her daughter's fever had climbed to 103 degrees. The doctor at the urgent care facility had confirmed what Nora already knew. Ear infection. Antibiotics. $180 for the prescription. $40 more for the follow-up visit in 2 weeks. Nora had $220 in savings. That was for Emma's school supplies, for rent, for the electric bill. She had taken the job at the Grand Palais Hotel on Tuesday afternoons, delivering food to private dining events. It paid $16 an hour, but tips were supposedly generous. She had worked 15 hours in 5 days and made exactly $34 in tips. That money was in her pocket when Victoria Ashford had accused her of stealing. The sound of Emma's cry echoed in her ears as she stood there, humiliated, while the entire restaurant watched. Douglas Hale's fingers dug deeper into her arm. The dining room seemed to tilt and spin. What Nora did not know, what she could not possibly have known, was that at the exact moment Victoria Ashford demanded she be arrested, Alejandro Calabrese was pulling out his phone from his jacket pocket and sending a single text message to Bruno. 2 words. Nothing more. Handle it. Everything that followed would come from those 2 words. Everything that would tear Victoria Ashford's life apart. Everything that would erase Douglas Hale from the city he thought he owned. Everything that would change Nora Sinclair from invisible into unforgettable. But first, the storm had to break. 8 years earlier, the Sunset District of San Francisco was all gray fog and golden streetlights, and Nora Sinclair was 24 years old with hope still alive in her eyes. She stood in the lobby of Mercy Care Home at 6:27 in the morning, her uniform pressed, her hair pulled back, her heart beating with the kind of certainty that only young people possess, the certainty that hard work would build something. The building smelled like lavender and antiseptic, that particular blend of care and clinical distance. She had been hired to turn beds and lift patients whose bodies had forgotten how to move, to read aloud to people with no one else to visit them, to be the kind of person who stayed when everyone else left. Mrs. Chen was in room 312, 86 years old, with silver hair like a dandelion and eyes that searched every face looking for a daughter who had stopped calling 7 years ago. Nora sat beside her bed at 2:15 on her second week, reading from a library book about gardens, her voice steady and warm like a prayer. When she finished the chapter, Mrs. Chen reached out with trembling fingers and took her hand. "You are kind," the old woman whispered. "You look at me like I am still here." Nora felt something crack open in her chest, something that felt like purpose. Her shift ended at 2:56 p.m. She changed into street clothes in the employee bathroom, and that was when she met Douglas Hale for the first time. He stood in the break room doorway, watching her, and something in the way his eyes moved across her body made her skin go tight. He was late 30s, with slick dark hair and a smile that did not reach anywhere near his eyes. He wore a manager's badge from the Grand Palais Hotel, the upscale restaurant connected to the care home by an interior corridor. His suit was expensive. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. His fingers were thick and pale. "You're the new girl," he said. "Not a question." "Nora. I started 2 weeks ago." She kept her voice steady, but something in her already sensed that this man was not safe. "The residents love you," he said. He stepped closer. "You have a sweetness about you. That's rare." His hand reached out and touched her shoulder, and it did not feel like a greeting. It felt like a claim. She stepped back and grabbed her bag. "Thank you for the compliment. I should go." "You should eat before you leave," he said. "I work at the restaurant next door. I could get you dinner. Staff meal. 20% off." "That's kind, but I need to get home. My rent is due." He smiled. It was the smile of someone who was used to people saying no and had never learned to accept it. "Everyone needs to eat, Nora. Come on." 30 minutes. She had been living on rice and eggs. She had $127 in savings and rent was $650. She went. The Grand Palais was all crystal chandeliers and dark wood, expensive wine bottles lined the walls like trophies. The staff ate in a back room that looked like a closet by comparison, metal folding chairs and fluorescent light. Hale brought her a plate of pasta, and while she ate, he stood against the counter watching her chew. When a family with an elderly mother came in for late lunch, Hale touched her lower back to guide her toward the dining room. His hand stayed longer than was necessary. It slid lower as she moved. 3 weeks later, she made her first mistake. A woman at a table had ordered the special, had been charming to Nora, had thanked her twice, and when she left, she had placed $17 in cash on the table beside her empty water glass. $17. That would buy Emma formula when she was born, or diapers, or part of next month's electric bill. Nora reached for the bills and Hale materialized beside her, his fingers closing over the cash before she could touch it. "Staff don't take tips," he said. His voice was soft, which made it worse. "That's not a staff tip. That's from a customer. Everything on this floor is mine. Everything the customers give is mine. You follow?" He was smiling. He was always smiling when he was being terrible. "Douglas, that's not fair." He leaned in close enough that she could smell his cologne, something sharp and chemical. "You know what would be unfair? If I had to call every restaurant manager in this city and tell them you're a thief. If I had to explain that you stole from customers. You would never work in San Francisco again, Nora. Not anywhere that matters. You would be unemployable. Do you have a family? Anyone depending on you?" She did not answer. "Good. Then you understand why you're going to do exactly what I say, and you're never going to complain about anything again." She was 25 years old. She needed the job. She stayed quiet. The years that followed were a slow grinding erosion, like water wearing at stone. Douglas Hale's hand would find her in the supply closet, on her lower back, sliding across her hip as he passed her in the hallway. She would flinch and he would smile and tell her she was lucky to have a job, that girls like her should be grateful. When she worked overtime, he would deduct time from her paycheck, claiming she had taken unauthorized breaks. When customers left tips, he pocketed them. When she mentioned it, he he would reference that single conversation from her first month. "Remember what I said about being unemployable?" 2 years into working at the Grand Palais, Nora met Marcus. He was a construction worker, broad-shouldered and kind-eyed, with hands that built things and a laugh that filled rooms. They met at a grocery store when she was buying the cheapest cut of chicken, and he was buying flowers for his mother's birthday. He helped her carry her bags to her apartment, a studio in the Richmond with a kitchen barely larger than a closet. He came back the next day with take-out Indian food and sat on her bed and told her about his family in Oakland. By the end of the month, he was sleeping over. By the end of the year, they were planning a future that felt possible for the first time. They married at City Hall on a Tuesday afternoon. No witnesses except the clerk, no white dress, just a simple ceremony that cost $40 in filing fees. Emma was born 13 months later on a Thursday morning, 6 pounds and 3 ounces, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's serious expression. Marcus held her and wept. Nora felt the weight of her daughter in her arms and something shifted inside her, a sense of purpose so overwhelming it felt like drowning and flying at the same time. Then came the accident. It was a Saturday morning, a routine construction site, a fall from scaffolding that should have been safe but was not. Marcus broke his leg in 3 places. The hospital kept him for 6 days. An infection set in. His fever climbed to 104 degrees, then 105. By the time they moved him to ICU, his organs were beginning to fail. He died on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after their wedding, with Nora holding one hand and his mother holding the other. The hospital bills came in waves. $23,000. She tried to dispute them, to negotiate with the accounts department, but the doctor who had saved his life for 2 weeks cost money, and the ICU bed cost money, and the medicines that had bought them another 14 hours cost money. She owed it all. She would spend the rest of her life owing it. At 26 years old, Nora Sinclair was a widow with a newborn and $34,000 in debt. She worked at Mercy Care Home from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., then rushed to the Grand Palais from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m., and on weekends she worked both locations. 84 hours a week. 4 hours of sleep a night. Her hands developed calluses that bled when she worked too long without gloves. Her back seized up in the mornings. Her feet carried permanent bruises from standing on concrete floors, from running between tables, from the night Douglas Hale pushed her so hard against the metal shelving that a can of industrial disinfectant fell and struck her shoulder, leaving a bruise that turned purple and then green and then yellow over 3 weeks. "You fell," he had said when the manager at Mercy Care asked about it. "You pushed me." Who would believe that? Who would testify for you? He was not even looking at her, just wiping down the bar. "I have 10 years of perfect employment history. I have recommendations from the corporate office. You have 8 months of decent work and a pattern of being clumsy. If you file anything, if you say anything to anyone, I will make sure you never work again. You and that baby of yours will be living in a shelter. Is that what you want?" She did not file anything. She did not tell anyone. She just kept working. The years accumulated like snow. Emma grew from a newborn into a toddler with her father's serious eyes and her mother's stubborn mouth. Nora would wake at 5:15 a.m., dress Emma, drop her at a subsidized daycare center, work 8 hours, pick Emma up, come home, make dinner from whatever ingredients she could find on clearance, sing her daughter to sleep, and then lay awake counting dollars in her head, trying to figure out how to stretch $34 across the next 5 days. She ate what was left on the patient's trays at Mercy Care. She drank water when she was hungry between shifts. She told herself this was temporary, that things would improve, that her daughter would have more than this. The only thing that remained unchanged was her grandmother's recipe book. It was small, bound in cloth that had faded from red to rust, with notes written in pencil margins that had smudged and softened over decades. Her grandmother had been a cook, not a chef, just a woman who knew how to make something warm and nourishing from nothing. Each recipe had a story in the margins: Rosa's favorite, add extra cinnamon, this keeps 6 days in the cold box, make when Samuel comes home from work, he always eats 3 bowls. Nora would open this book on nights when everything felt impossible, and she would read those penciled notes and feel her grandmother's hands in her own hands. 3 weeks ago, Emma had developed a fever. It started as a small thing, a warm forehead, a runny nose, and then it climbed. Nora brought her to the urgent care facility on a Tuesday evening. The doctor examined her ears, nodded gravely, and wrote prescriptions, antibiotics for the infection, acetaminophen for the fever. $180. Nora had $220 in savings. She paid it. She went home and gave Emma the medicine and tried not to calculate how she would pay the electric bill. But the fever did not break. Instead, it climbed higher. By the following Monday, Emma's breathing had changed. It sounded like something small and animal, like a creature trapped in her tiny chest. Nora brought her back to urgent care, but this time the doctor looked more serious. He sent her to St. Mary's Hospital, to the pediatric floor, where a specialist examined her lungs with a stethoscope and said the word pneumonia with the weight it deserved. Emma was admitted, and 4 was placed in her small arm. Oxygen ran through a clear tube beneath her nose. The hospital bill would be astronomical. Within 3 days, it was $35,000. 7 years of her wages, if nothing unexpected happened. But unexpected things happened every day. It was on a Thursday afternoon, 6 hours into a shift at the Grand Palais, that Nora made her decision. She would take more hours. She would work every possible shift. She would skip meals herself. She would solve this. She walked toward the private dining room where Victoria Ashford was hosting an intimate luncheon, carrying a tray of appetizers, her mind already reorganizing her schedule, calculating which hours she could add without Emma's daycare facility closing. The dining room was elegant in the way that only spaces built for wealth could be. White tablecloths. Fresh flowers. 8 women in expensive clothing, their laughter like chiming bells. Nora moved through them silently, the way she had learned to move, invisible, efficient, present but not really seen. She was setting down the final plate when Victoria Ashford's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. "Where is my emerald bracelet?" The voice was sharp, cutting through the soft conversation like a knife through silk. Nora turned, confused. "I'm sorry. I set it on the table during the second course. It was right here." Victoria Ashford stood up. She was 62, with grey hair styled in a severe bob, with diamond earrings that cost more than Nora's monthly rent. "I set it right here on the napkin and now it's gone." "You took it." "I didn't." "Don't lie." The woman's voice had gone cold. "I saw you looking at it. Everyone here knows that people like you steal. People like you are always stealing." The room had gone very quiet. 7 faces were watching. Nora felt the blood drain from her face. "I didn't take your bracelet." "I would never." "She's lying," Victoria Ashford said. Her hand was still holding Nora's wrist, her fingers digging into the bone. "Call the police. Call them now. I want her arrested." Douglas Hale materialized from somewhere in her peripheral vision. He took her other arm, and his touch burned with something hot and possessive. "We'll search you," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "In front of everyone. Right here." Emma was in a hospital bed at that moment. Emma was sick and alone, without her mother, and Nora was being accused of theft in front of 50 witnesses. Her voice came out broken, barely a whisper. "My daughter is in the hospital. I have a child who needs me. And I am a woman who needs justice," Victoria Ashford said. That was when Nora's phone buzzed. A single text from the daycare center, Emma's father listed as emergency contact. "Contacted him. He is coming to get Emma if you do not respond within the hour." There was no father. There had never been anyone else. Emma had only her. What Nora Sinclair did not know, what she could not possibly have understood in that moment of absolute devastation, was that at the precise second Victoria Ashford accused her of stealing, Alejandro Calabrese was sitting in a black SUV 3 blocks away, parked on a quiet street in the financial district, while Bruno placed his phone on speaker. "The papers are clean," Bruno said. "Hale has been running money through the restaurant for 8 months. Rival family out of Oakland is using the Grand Palais as a wash point. But there is something else." "What?" Alejandro said. His voice was flat, like someone stating a fact that had already been decided. "The restaurant manager. Hale. He has been stealing from the staff. Tips, wages, everything. And worse. There is a woman. She works there. The daycare facility called her emergency contact." Alejandro's hand moved to the window. "Send me his address." Outside the Grand Palais, the November wind was tearing through the streets with the kind of violence that announces change, that tells you something is about to break open. Somewhere in that city, a young woman was standing in a dining room with her arms held by 2 men, being accused of theft, her daughter alone in a hospital, and a storm was gathering force that would tear apart everyone who had ever touched her with cruelty. The rain hammered against the windshield like bullets fired from the sky itself, and Nora Sinclair's hands trembled so violently she could barely grip the steering wheel. The engine had died 5 minutes ago. 5 minutes that felt like 5 centuries. Behind her, in the car seat, Emma whimpered, not the full crying of earlier, but the broken, exhausted whimpers of a 6-year-old girl who had experienced too much devastation in a single afternoon. Nora turned to look at her daughter's face, streaked with tears and snot, eyes swollen from screaming, and something inside her chest simply broke. Not shattered. Broke. Like old glass finally giving way under weight it was never meant to carry. She had $34 in her purse. $34. $35,000 in medical bills sat in a hospital file 3 miles away. And 8 years of stolen wages, stolen dignity, stolen hope had culminated in this moment, a dead car on the shoulder of Highway 101 during a summer thunderstorm that had turned the sky the color of a bruise. Nora put her forehead on the steering wheel and did not cry. Her tears had abandoned her somewhere around the time Douglas Hale's hands gripped her shoulders in his office, somewhere between his voice and Victoria Ashford's laughter. She just sat there. Just breathed. Just existed in the space between having everything to lose and having already lost it all. And then, through the rain-streaked windshield, she saw the headlights. Not one set. 3. Moving through the downpour in formation, appearing and disappearing in the sheets of rain like something pulled from a nightmare. The vehicle slowed as they approached her stalled Civic. 3 black Escalades. Tinted windows. Moving with intention, with choreography, like a school of sharks that had caught the scent of blood in water. Nora's heart seized. Her hands moved instinctively to lock the doors. She had heard the stories everyone heard. Women alone on dark highways. Vulnerable women with small children. This was how the worst stories began. The lead vehicle pulled up alongside her. The passenger window lowered with a whisper of electric motors. Rain poured sideways into the Escalade's interior. A man in a black suit, broad-shouldered and expressionless, leaned across from the driver's seat. Water dripped from his dark hair. "Your vehicle is disabled," he said. Not a question. A statement delivered in the tone of someone accustomed to absolute certainty. Nora's voice came out as barely a whisper. It just stopped. The engine. It died. I can call someone. I can get a tow truck. We're fine. Emma whimpered again from the back seat. Not fine. Not even close to fine. The man's eye shifted to the rear window where Emma was visible, small and terrified, a child's face swollen from tears. Something flickered across his expression. Something ancient and unreadable. He straightened in his seat. "Open your door," he said. Every instinct Nora possessed screamed at her to lock it tighter, to scream, to do anything but comply. But there was something in his voice that was not asking. It was instructing the way gravity instructs objects to fall. She found her hands moving to unlock the door. Rain flooded in immediately, cold and violent. The man stepped out into the downpour. The rear door of the middle vehicle opened. Another man emerged, this one with the bearing of someone accustomed to proximity to power. He moved with the economy of motion that comes from training, from muscle memory built in rooms where mistakes cost lives. Bruno. That was the name that would appear in hospitals and police reports and the fevered dreams of men who had crossed Alejandro Calabrese and lived long enough to regret it. Bruno approached Nora's driver's side window. In his hand was an umbrella that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. He opened her door, shielding the opening as much as he could. "The child," he said gently, and his gentleness was somehow more terrifying than any threat could have been. "Let me take her out of the rain." "No," Nora said. "No, I can." But Bruno was already moving to the rear door, opening it with such careful deliberation that Nora's resistance collapsed. He reached into the back seat. Emma flinched away from him, and Nora heard him whisper something. She could not catch the words, but the tone was soothing, the way someone speaks to a wounded animal. He wrapped Emma in his suit jacket, cradling her against his chest. The man from the Escalade's passenger seat stepped into view. He was tall, 6'3", perhaps 6'4", with dark hair silvered at the temples and a scar that ran along his left jawline like a permanent reminder of a violence that had nearly claimed him once. His suit was black and expensive in a way that transcended fashion. This was the suit of a man for whom the price of clothing was not a consideration. It was simply the uniform of authority. He wore it the way generals wear medals. He looked directly at Nora through the rain. "You need help," he said. And Nora Sinclair, soaked and shaking and running on fumes that had themselves run dry, found herself unable to argue with a simple statement of fact. "My car," she whispered. It just died." His name was Alejandro Calabrese, though she would not know that yet. Would not know what that name meant in the underground rooms of San Francisco, in the back offices where money was cleaned and debts were collected in currency that transcended dollars. What she saw was a man stepping into a storm to help a stranger. What she could not see was the precision of his arrival, the fact that Bruno had been tailing Douglas Hale for weeks, had watched her being accused at the hotel, had relayed the specific moment of her humiliation to his boss on a phone call made from 3 blocks away. Alejandro had not appeared because of random chance. He had appeared because the universe, in its particular way, sometimes arranges collisions between people who are meant to change each other's trajectories. "Come with me," he said. "Your vehicle will be taken care of." Nora climbed out of her car, the rain immediately soaking through her shirt, her hair plastering to her face. She followed him to the middle escalade. Bruno was already inside the vehicle with Emma, the space warm and dry and impossibly clean. The leather seat smelled like expensive cologne and leather conditioner and the strange metallic scent of wealth. Emma had stopped crying. She was staring at Bruno with the kind of cautious curiosity that children adopt when they encounter something completely outside their normal experience. Nora climbed into the vehicle beside her daughter. The door closed. The storm outside became a distant thing, muffled, separated from them by layers of tinted glass and climate control. Alejandro sat directly across from her in the rear-facing seat. His eyes were dark grey, like storm clouds, and they contained the kind of intelligence that comes from having to read people for survival. Behind him, she caught the profile of another man at the wheel, Sal, though she would not learn his name for hours yet. They drove in silence except for the rain on the roof and the quiet hum of the engine. 30 minutes later, the three of them sat in a booth at an all-night diner on Mission Street. The kind of place that had seen everything, judged nothing, existed in the space between legitimate commerce and the underground. Yellow fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The smell of coffee, bacon grease, and something chemical, a cleaner or bleach, hung in the air. Emma had drifted into an exhausted sleep in Nora's lap, her small body wrapped in Bruno's suit jacket that swallowed her almost completely. She looked impossibly tiny. Impossibly fragile. Alejandro sat across from Nora in the booth. He ordered without asking her preferences, grilled cheese for her, chicken soup, hot chocolate for Emma when she woke. When the food arrived and Nora realized she had not eaten since yesterday morning, since before the delivery shift, since before the humiliation, she had to grip the table to steady herself. The grilled cheese was still warm. Steam rose from the soup. This was real. She took a bite. Then another. She could not help it. The tears came then, quietly, running down her face while she chewed and swallowed and tried to make herself small enough to disappear. Alindro watched her. Bruno stood near the diner's entrance, giving them privacy but remaining close enough to respond if needed. Sal was outside, visible through the rain-streaked window, standing beside the escalades like a sentinel. "What happened at the hotel?" Alindro said. "Not a question." Nora told him. She told him about the false accusation, about Victoria Ashford's diamond-laden fingers pointing at her, about the voice like broken glass. She told him about Douglas Hale, about the squeeze of his hands on her shoulders, about the choice he had given her, walk away now or face police and child services. She did not tell him about the 8 years of stolen wages. That truth was still too large to contain. "I have a daughter who needs me," she whispered. Alindro leaned back in the booth. His fingers, long and steady, drummed once against the table. "Why were you working delivery if you work at Mercy Care Home?" The question cracked something open in her. She looked down at her soup and the words came out broken, fragmented, desperate. "The pneumonia," she said. "Emma's pneumonia. The hospital. The bills." She pulled out her phone. The screen lit with notifications from St. Mary's Hospital. $35,000. The words blurred. "I need $35,000, Nora said. She heard her own voice as if from a distance. "I need $35,000 and I have $34 and that's all. That's all I have." Alindro's expression did not change. But something shifted in the space between them. Bruno felt it from across the diner. Sal saw it through the rain-streaked window. Something cold and dangerous and utterly protective stirred in the chest of a man who had built an empire on violence and silence. "I will take care of it," Alindro said. Nora pulled back from the table. "Why would you help me? I am nobody." His voice, when he spoke, sounded like thunder distilled into human language. "You are not nobody." He made a call. He did not raise his voice. He did not raise it at all. He simply spoke into the phone with such absolute conviction that within 20 minutes, a lawyer arrived at the diner, wet from the rain, carrying papers. The medical debt would be dissolved by morning through a medical foundation that appeared to exist only in files and corporate formations. $35,000 erased by 30 seconds of phone conversation. "What do you want in return?" Nora asked. "Nothing," Alindro said. But what she did not know was that Alindro Calabrese had been 7 years old when his father's fists first broke his arm. 9 when the caseworkers finally came. 12 when he crawled out of the foster system and into the streets. 17 when he killed the man who had tried to traffic him, and understood then that the world recognized only one language, and it was violence spoken with absolute fluency. He had clawed upward through blood and silence, built an empire that controlled the underground poker rooms and dark money of the entire Bay Area, and swore to himself that no child would suffer the way he had suffered. When he had watched Victoria Ashford screaming at a woman holding a baby, something in him had cracked open. The scar on his jaw seemed to throb with recognition. Here was cruelty for sport. Here was a woman with nothing being ground beneath the heel of a woman with everything. Here was the exact configuration of injustice that he had spent 25 years building power to destroy. Meanwhile, across the city, Douglas Hale stood in his office above the restaurant kitchen, steam rising from the delivery orders stacked on his desk. He had been expecting the call, but not the way it came. Not the woman's voice, soft and precise, stating facts like they had already been decided. "The Sinclair woman is handled," he said into the phone, speaking to someone in the Moretti organization. "She's gone. Won't be a problem." What Hale did not know was that Bruno had been tailing him for 8 months. Bruno, who had documented every cash transfer, every falsified invoice, every relationship between Hale and the rival family that was using the Grand Palais as a money-washing operation. Hale was already marked. He simply had not known it yet. Back in the diner, Nora asked Alindro one more time why. This time, he answered. 8 hours ago, he said quietly, I watched you humiliated in front of your daughter. You did not beg. You did not cry. You stood there and took it because you had no choice. I know what that feels like. I spent a childhood knowing what that feels like. Their eyes met across the booth. Emma stirred in Nora's lap but did not wake. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the diner, something had shifted. The temperature of the world had changed. A woman who had been invisible 8 hours ago had suddenly become someone worth the attention of a man whose attention was a weapon. 2 days later, Thursday morning at 7:43 a.m., Nora wakes in the hotel room and her first thought is Emma. Her daughter lies beside her, breathing steadily, her small chest rising and falling like nothing has changed. But everything has changed. Emma's skin no longer carries that grey, exhausted tone. The fever broke sometime in the night. Nora reaches out and touches her daughter's forehead. Cool. Normal. She sits on the edge of the bed and allows herself to cry, not from sadness, but from the weight of something lifting. She did not expect it. She did not believe it was possible. Her phone buzzes on the nightstand. The hospital. She answers before the second ring. The voice on the other end is professional, detached, reading from a script. Miss Sinclair, we are calling to confirm that your daughter's account has been settled in full. Zero balance remaining. The discharge paperwork is ready whenever you are ready to collect her. Congratulations on her recovery. Nora cannot speak. She cannot form words. The woman on the phone repeats the message. Zero balance. $47,000 in medical debt, erased like it was written in water. She ends the call and sits in the silence of the hotel room. Emma stirs, opens her eyes, and smiles at her mother. That smile. That single smile contains everything Nora has been fighting for across 8 years of double shifts and stolen tips. She tries to call Alindro. There is no number in her phone. She has no way to reach him. She waits, thinking he will call. He does not. By 10 a.m., her old phone rings. It is a number she recognizes. Mercy Care Home. The administrator's voice is different than she remembers, softer, almost apologetic. Miss Sinclair, we would like you to return to work. There was a misunderstanding regarding the incident at the hotel. Your previous employment record is spotless. We need you. Can you come in today? Afternoon shift? 1 o'clock? She agrees before her mind can catch up to the words. She needs work. She needs income. The hotel room is temporary. The gratitude of one night cannot pay rent forever. She showers. She dresses in her old Mercy Care uniform, faded blue scrubs worn soft from dozens of washings. She arranges for a neighbor to watch Emma. Then she walks into her workplace for the first time in 3 days. The hallway smells the same. Antiseptic and old linoleum and the faint ghost of industrial cleaner. Her hands know this place. Her body remembers the weight of lifting Mr. Patterson, the gentle way you turn Mrs. Chen so she does not develop bedsores, the quiet conversations with residents who have nobody else to talk to. She begins her shift. Everything feels normal. And then, at 11:07 a.m., Douglas Hale walks through the staff entrance. He is looking for something. His eyes scan the hallway, the offices, the break room. When he sees Nora, his entire body stiffens. He walks toward her with purpose. There is no greeting. There is only the red in his face and the sweat on his forehead, though the building is cool. He corners her in the supply hallway, his body blocking the only exit. Around them are stacks of linens, boxes of gloves, bottles of medical supplies arranged in careful rows. Everything ordinary becomes a cage. His voice comes out low and dangerous, like a blade running along bone. What did you do? Who did you call? Who do you know? His hand reaches out and grabs her arm. His fingers dig into her skin with bruising force. She pulls back, but he is stronger. He has always been stronger. I don't know what you mean, she says. Her voice comes out small. She hates how small it sounds. You think you can destroy me? His grip tightens. His breath smells like coffee and something rotten underneath. You are nothing. You understand? Nobody. You think calling someone makes you important? You think anyone would help a woman like you? He slams her backward. Her spine hits the metal shelving unit. Pain explodes across her shoulder blades. She gasps. Everything inside her wants to collapse, wants to accept this, wants to go quiet like she always has. But she thinks about Emma asleep in the hotel room. She thinks about the kind of woman her daughter will become if she watches her mother accept this. She pushes him. Hard. She pushes him with all of her 125 pounds and it catches him off guard. He stumbles backward. His hand releases her arm. For one moment, the supply hallway is silent except for the sound of their breathing. Then Hale raises his hand. His palm opens. He is going to strike her. His hand moves toward her face like a weapon. And then a voice comes from the hallway entrance, calm and absolute, like a judge pronouncing sentence. I would not. Bruno steps into the supply hallway. He is wearing a charcoal suit that costs more than Nora's monthly rent. Behind him stands Sal, broader, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw like a map of violence. Both men are utterly still. They do not move toward Hale. They simply stand there, blocking the exit, their presence alone sufficient. Hale's hand freezes mid-air. His entire body goes rigid. He lowers his arm slowly. What do you want? Hale's voice has changed. Gone is the authority. What remains is fear, raw and unfiltered. Bruno steps closer. His voice is quiet, which makes it more terrifying. Mr. Calabrese would like a word with you. You are going to come with us now. He does not ask. He states it like the weather, like a fact already decided by forces larger than any man's will. Hale looks at Nora. For a moment, something like understanding passes across his face, the moment he realizes that the woman he cornered 3 days ago is not powerless. The moment he understands that his mistake has consequences he cannot survive. Bruno and Sal escort him from the building. They do not use force. They do not need to. The quiet certainty of their presence is enough. The supply hallway is empty. Nora leans against the shelving unit and allows her legs to tremble. They will not hold her if she stands. She slides down to sit on the cold linoleum floor, her back against the metal, surrounded by boxes and bottles and ordinary things. She thinks about the storm that brought her to that highway, the black SUVs that emerged like something pulled from another world. She thinks about Alejandro Calabrese sitting across from her in a diner booth, his intensity softening when he looked at Emma. She thinks about a world that operated by different rules than the one she has known, rules where the powerless sometimes become visible, where cruelty carries consequences, where someone with nothing matters enough that a man with everything will act. Across the city, at the Fairmorn Hotel on Nob Hill, Victoria Ashford sits at a charity luncheon surrounded by women who wear the same brand she wears, who vacation in the same places, who nod and smile and reinforce the carefully constructed fiction of her worth. The ballroom is decorated in white and silver. Light streams through windows overlooking San Francisco Bay. Victoria laughs, a high, practiced sound, and talks about property investments and wine tastings and her plans for a summer home in Napa. She is untouchable. She has always been untouchable. At 12:14 p.m., 3 FBI agents walk through the ballroom doors. They move with purpose. The conversation around the tables begins to falter. The agents approach Victoria's table. One of them states her name clearly, audibly, in front of 200 women from the city's oldest families. Victoria Margaret Ashford, you are under arrest for money laundering, conspiracy, and conspiracy to commit fraud. She stands, disbelieving. She says nothing. She cannot argue or explain or cry or beg because there are cameras, and within minutes there will be photographs, and within hours there will be articles, and within days there will be documentaries. The agents place handcuffs on her wrists. She is led out of the ballroom. The women at her table sit in frozen silence. A friend's phone appears. A photo is taken. The photo is sent to a group chat. The group chat sends it to another group chat. By the time Victoria reaches the police car, the image of her in handcuffs, mascara running, mouth open in a shape of denial, has been seen by 47,000 people. By evening, it will be 800,000. By the next morning, every news outlet in California will have run the story. Her husband files for divorce within 48 hours. Her name becomes toxic. The organizations that courted her money issue statements distancing themselves. The women who lunched with her disappear. Victoria Ashford, who built her identity on the certainty that she would never face consequences, is about to spend the next 40 years in federal prison. That night, Nora sits on the floor of her apartment, her back against the living room wall, Emma asleep in the bedroom down the hallway. The television plays quietly. Images of Victoria Ashford being arrested cycle through news programs. Images of Douglas Hale's abandoned apartment being sealed by police. The news anchors discuss money laundering, federal investigations, the Moretti family's cash-washing operation. Nora hears the words, but they feel disconnected from reality, like watching a story that happened to someone else. She should feel triumphant. She should feel avenged. Instead, she feels hollow. 8 years of abuse. 8 years of stolen tips and degrading comments and hands that did not respect her boundaries. 8 years of silence because she had no choice and no power and no one who would listen. She stands and walks to the bathroom. She looks at herself in the mirror. Her reflection is thinner than it should be. There are lines around her eyes that should not exist at a woman of her age. She traces the scar on her shoulder, the one from the first time Hale hurt her, the time she said nothing because she was new and needed the job. The scar is pale now, faded by time, but still visible if you know where to look. Rain starts outside, softer than before, tapping against the bathroom window like something trying to be let in. Her hands shake. She grips the edge of the sink. She thinks about all the times she said nothing. All the times she let it happen because refusal seemed impossible. All the time she accepted cruelty as the natural order of the world because she knew nothing different. She thinks about the kind of woman she wants Emma to become. The kind of woman who does not accept this. The kind of woman who knows her own worth. A sound comes from the baby monitor on the counter. Emma, sleep laughing at a dream. That laugh. That single sound of her daughter's joy, untethered and true and unconcerned with the weight of the world. Nora's hand steady. She is still here. She survived. The reflection looking back at her is not the same woman who stood on Highway 101 in a thunderstorm. Something has shifted. Something fundamental. She breathes. 11 floors below the city streets, in the financial district, there is a room that does not appear on any map. Underground. Soundproof. Walls covered in dark wood. A poker table dominates the center, green felt worn smooth by decades of hands. Cigar smoke hangs thick in the air like a living thing. Stacks of cash sit in neat arrangements. Guns rest visibly on the hips of men in tailored suits. Armed guards stand at the single door. Alejandro Calabrese sits at the head of the table. He is not playing cards. He is waiting. At 11 p.m. exactly, Douglas Hale is brought in by 2 men whose faces show no expression whatsoever. His hands are zip-tied behind his back. His shirt is torn. He is trembling like a cornered animal, like something caged and terrified and finally understanding that escape is not possible. Mr. Hale, Alejandro says, his voice level and conversational. Please, sit. Hale is forced into a chair across from him. Alejandro leans back. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. You have been stealing from your employees for 8 years. You have taken money that did not belong to you. Money earned through the labor of people who had no choice but to accept your theft because they were more afraid of losing their jobs than they were capable of bearing the loss. You have put your hands on women who could not fight back. You have done this because you believed you were powerful and they were nothing. You have also been laundering money for a family that operates in territory that does not belong to them. Territory that belongs to me. Hale collapses to his knees. He begs. Words pour out of him in a desperate flood. I had no choice. They forced me. They said they would hurt me if I didn't. I was afraid. I am so sorry. I will disappear. I will leave the city. I will leave the country. Please. I will do anything. Alejandro does not move. Everyone has a choice. Every single person, no matter how afraid they are, has a choice. You made yours. You chose money over kindness. You chose power over humanity. You chose to believe that because you had the authority to hire and fire, you had the right to steal and strike. That belief needs to be corrected. The justice that comes next is not death. Death would be too quick. Too easy. Too merciful. Instead, Hale is handed to the Vitoli crew, Oakland's oldest crime family, payment for an old debt that Alejandro owed their aging patriarch. Hale will disappear into their network. He will be dragged away screaming down the corridor that leads to the back exit, the exit that opens into the underground tunnels running beneath the financial district. His screams will echo in that darkness for exactly 7 seconds before the door closes. After that, there will be silence. Perfect, absolute silence. Bruno steps forward and asks, "Do you want updates on him?" Alejandro shakes his head. No. He is erased. The word hangs in the air. Erased. A man who existed, who caused harm, who believed in his own permanence, simply ceases to exist in any meaningful way. The men return to their cards. The game continues as if nothing happened. Victoria Ashford's fate becomes public record within 72 hours. Federal prison. 40 years minimum. No possibility of parole. Asset forfeiture. Every penny seized. Her children distanced themselves within a week. Her husband had the marriage annulled, claiming fraud and duress, divorcing himself from her so thoroughly that in legal documents, it is as if they never knew each other. Her social circles erased her? The charities removed her name from donor walls. Her reputation, built across for decades, obliterated in 4 days. She sits in a federal holding facility awaiting trial, her orange jumpsuit a uniform of erasure, her future a hallway stretching into darkness. The storm passed. The rain stopped. The sky cleared. And in that clearing, Nora Sinclair remained standing, stronger than the night that tried to break her. The penthouse doors slid open like the entrance to another world. Nora's hand trembled as she stepped inside, Emma clinging to her leg, both of them hesitant on the threshold of marble and light. Floor-to-ceiling windows dominated the space, each one framing a different piece of San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge suspended in afternoon mist, the bay spreading below like liquid silver, the city reduced to something small and distant. This was the view from the top. This was what power looked like. Alejandro stood waiting, no longer the man in the rain. He wore a dark sweater that fit him like water, the sleeves pushed to his elbows, his wrists bare except for the silver watch that probably cost more than everything Nora owned combined. His hair was damp. He had just stepped from a shower. Everything about him whispered dangerous ease. "You came," he said. His voice carried no surprise, only a statement of fact, like he had known she would arrive exactly at this time, in this emotional state, with her daughter's small hand locked in hers. "You sent an address," Nora replied. Her words came out fragile, barely held together. "I saw the news. Victoria Ashford. 40 years. Asset forfeiture. Everything gone." He nodded once, a movement so small it almost didn't happen. "And Douglas Hale?" Nora asked. "The news said he disappeared. That there is an investigation. That the police have no leads." Alejandro turned toward the windows. The light caught the side of his face, illuminating the scar that ran from his left eye down to his cheekbone, a map of old violence. Some men erase themselves, he said. They disappear because the alternatives are worse. Hale chose to vanish rather than face what was coming. Emma tugged on Nora's sleeve. "Mommy, there is so much sky." Nora's breath caught. "Mommy." Emma had never called her that before. For 8 years, it had been Nora, or Miss Nora, or sometimes Mama in the dark when she was sick and scared. But Mommy carried permanence. Mommy meant safety. Mommy meant someone who stayed. Alindro watched the child with an intensity that seemed impossible to direct at someone so small. "What is your name?" he asked, kneeling down to Emma's eye level, his expensive sweater pressing against his knees. "Emma. I am 4 years old. Mommy says I am strong." Emma held up her stuffed bear, the one with the missing ear, the one that had traveled everywhere with her since she was born. "This is Bear. He is strong too." Alindro took the bear with both hands, holding it like it contained something precious and breakable. For several seconds, he didn't speak. His jaw tightened. Something flickered behind his eyes, dark and wounded. "Bear is very strong," Alindro said finally. "The strongest bear I have ever met." Nora watched this. She watched a man whose voice could end lives handle a 4-year-old's toy like it was made of glass. She watched him return the bear gently, watched Emma smile at him without caution or fear. Children could see things. They could recognize danger, yes, but they could also recognize gentleness in a way adults had learned not to. Emma recognized something in Alindro that made her hand reach out and touch his scar with one small finger. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Not anymore," he said. He stood, and when he looked at Nora, his expression had shifted. There was something raw exposed in his face, something he usually kept buried. "Sit," he said. Not a command. An invitation. The penthouse had a sitting area oriented toward the windows, a sofa in pale grey that probably cost more than Nora's rent for 6 months. She Saturday. Emma curled beside her, still holding Bear. Alindro took the chair across from them, not sitting beside her, maintaining distance, as if he understood that proximity would overwhelm her. "Why did you really help me?" Nora asked. The question came out as barely a whisper. "Not because of Hale's crimes. Not because Victoria humiliated me in front of Emma. There are 1,000 women in San Francisco being exploited. You did not come for them. You came because of me." "Why?" Alindro was quiet for a long moment. The city hummed below them. Traffic moved in patterns. People lived their small lives, unaware of the forces that move beneath the surface, unaware that some men could reshape reality with a phone call. "My mother," he said finally. "I was 9 years old. My father, Vincent Calabrese, was a man who believed that power meant the right to strike. He struck my mother across a kitchen table while I watched. Over and over. She did not fight back. She did not cry. She just endured. The next time he came home drunk, he struck harder. The hospital said she had internal bleeding. They said if she had come sooner, they might have saved her. But she had not come sooner because she believed she deserved it. She believed she had no power to leave." Emma had fallen asleep against Nora's shoulder, her breathing deepening into the rhythm of childhood rest. "I was placed in foster care," Alindro continued. "St. Catherine's, run by a nun named Sister Margaret who fed us enough to survive and beat us enough to remember we were nothing. I stayed until I was 17. I walked out one day and never went back. I joined the street crews in the Tenderloin. I moved cocaine and heroin and learned to use my fists and a knife. I climbed. I built an empire from concrete and blood and silence. And I thought I had outrun my past. I thought that power meant I would never see what I saw in that kitchen again." He paused. His hands rested on his knees, perfectly still. "Then I saw you in the hotel restaurant," he said. "And I saw my mother's face in yours. I saw the same resignation. the same belief that you deserved what was being done to you. Victoria Ashford called you a thief. Douglas Hale's hands were on your body in a room full of witnesses, and every witness looked away. And in that moment, watching you try to gather your dignity while he humiliated you in front of your daughter, I understood why I had climbed. Why I had become what I became. I had clawed my way out of darkness so that men like Douglas Hale would know that there are consequences. That women like you are not powerless. That someone is watching. That someone will answer. Nora felt her eyes flood. The tears came from somewhere deep, somewhere she had not accessed in the 8 years of survival, the 8 years of swallowing her pride and her rage and her grief. These were not tears of pity or gratitude. They were the tears of recognition. Two people carved by the same hand, the hand of cruelty, standing in a penthouse and understanding that they had both paid prices to get here. I saw my mother, Alindro said, and I could not let her story end the way hers did. I could not let you disappear. Nora reached across the space between them and took his hand. His hand was large, warm, the palm calloused beneath expensive care. She placed her other hand on top of his, trapping it between both of hers. You saved me on the worst night of my life, she said. No, Alindro replied. His voice had changed. It carried something tender, something almost broken. You saved me too. You just do not know it yet. Watching you stand taller every day, watching you walk into that community kitchen and begin to help other people who are where you were, watching you move through the world like someone who has decided she will not disappear, you reminded me why I fought so hard to get out. You reminded me that there is something worth building beyond an empire of fear. Through the windows, the light was beginning to shift. The afternoon sun touched the Bay Bridge, turning it gold. Emma slept peacefully, her small hand still gripping Bear's ear. I want to offer you something, Alindro said. Not charity. Not obligation. A position. I have a community kitchen in the Mission District. It serves people who cannot afford to eat well. The current manager is leaving. I need someone to run it. Someone who understands hunger. Someone who understands what it means to be unseen. Someone with the kind of strength that comes from surviving. What does it pay? Nora asked. He told her a number. It was more than double what she had ever earned. It included health insurance for Emma. It included a small office with a window and a door that locked. I accept, she said. 3 months later, the Mission District kitchen thrived under Nora's hand. The walls were painted in warm yellows and earth tones. The menu rotated through recipes from her grandmother's book, the one with notes in the margins, the margin notes that had carried her through countless nights. She wore it clipped to her apron now, those old pages protected in a laminate sleeve, a bridge between past and survival. Emma laughed in a chair at the kitchen counter, healthy and strong, her medical bills paid, her future no longer a terror. She was registered at a good school. She had a toddler bed with real sheets and a closet full of clothes that fit. Alindro appeared on Sunday mornings, always with Bruno and Sal waiting in the front seating area, but the visits grew longer. The bodyguards learned to wait with coffee and pastries. Alindro learned to spend hours in the small office with Nora, speaking about nothing in particular, the weather, the way light touched the windows, the way Emma laughed at jokes he told in Italian. On the 4th Sunday, he brought a toy kitchen set. It was small, perfect for a 4-year-old, with working faucets and a tiny stove and pots that clattered when Emma rattled them. For you, he said. So you can cook with your mother. So you can learn what she is teaching the world. Emma hugged his legs. Later, when Emma was napping in the back room, Alindro sat at the kitchen counter while Nora made coffee using her grandmother's recipe, cinnamon, a whisper of cardamom, water heated to exactly the right temperature. She poured 2 cups into ceramic bowls that had survived the journey from her old life. I have not felt peace like this in 20 years, Alindro said, accepting the bowl with both hands. There is always a threat coming. Always someone wanting power, always something requiring my attention. But here, with you making coffee the way your grandmother taught you, with Emma asleep across the hall, I feel like I can breathe for the first time since I was 9 years old. Nora set down her own cup and took his hand. You gave me my life back, she said. You gave me a future where I am not invisible. Let me give you something too, a place where you are not the boss, where you are not feared. A place where you are just a Leandro. Where you can rest. He looked at her. His dark eyes held the weight of everything he had done, everything he had endured, everything he had become. And then, slowly, he leaned across the counter and kissed her. The kiss was careful and slow, two people learning what trust felt like. Through the kitchen window, the San Francisco afternoon spread out like a promise. How did this story make you feel? Please leave a comment below and share what is in your heart. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.